Hi, welcome to Iowa City's Other News here November 1st, 2003. Today's show is called Energy Aftermath. We're going to be talking about various ways that utility companies affect us and continue to affect our lives and the quality of our lives. I'm joined in the studio today by Nick Maybanks of the Sierra Club. Thank you for being here, Nick. And we're going to talk about the Iowa-Illinois Manor Apartments Superfund site and the meeting that they had on October 20th of last week or a week or so ago, where we met with the EPA. You met with the EPA and other people. Joe Bolcom helped organize that, and a father of one of the young women who lives in the apartment. Nick, thanks for being here with us.
Thanks for having me.
And first I want to know what is underneath this site and what makes it so potentially dangerous?
Interesting question. That's what a lot of us would like to know, actually, is what exactly is underneath this site. The history of this site extends back almost 150 years to an energy company that was based and created in Iowa City back around 1857 to begin producing energy at that point in time. But when the pollution really started to take place and the remnants of what we see today started to take place was in 1910 when Iowa-Illinois Electric Company at that point in time was engaged in the process of coal gasification, a new form of energy during that time period that involved roasting coal to produce natural gas. And worked fine during the time, but much like a lot of the environmental impacts that we find in our communities, we don't realize what they were doing until after the fact. And what was happening was the residual of the coal gasification process, coal tar, was created when the natural gas was made from the...
That's a byproduct of...
That's a byproduct. And much like anything that's a byproduct, you can't easily dispose of it. So what they did is what coal gasification plants were doing around the country and around Iowa at that time is stored them in tanks underneath the site. Now, this particular site has not been investigated to the extent to find out that there is coal tar in those tanks underneath the site. But if you base studies that have been done on other similar sites, it's likely that there is coal tar in there, and it's likely that that coal tar is contaminating the groundwater in nearby Ralston Creek.
Now, I have a map here, and I don't know if we're going to show this now or later. It says there's a cistern on the site. There are 2 iron gas holders, and they are 60 foot in diameter, 8 feet deep. If they're full of coal tar, that's a lot of coal tar.
Yes, it is.
What concerns me, and I'm sure everyone else, is how close this site is to Ralston Creek. What is coal tar made out of, or what are some of the elements we find in coal tar? I saw arsenic, benzene, in some of this data here. Arsenic, benzene, lead, xylene.
Yeah, you're on the right track.
These are all pretty dangerous chemicals.
Yes, and the dangerous chemicals are deemed scientifically as polynuclear aromatic compounds, and there's approximately 16 of those found in coal tar. And some of them are what you already mentioned, but I'll just...
There's more.
There's more, yes. Benzene is one of particular concern, ethylbenzene, toluene, xylene, lead, arsenic, cyanide, all of which are known carcinogens.
There's the map we see there, 60 foot diameter, 8 feet deep. They're directly underneath this apartment building, which is on Burlington Street. I think it's 505 Burlington.
That's correct.
Is the address. And Burlington and Van Buren. Who owns the site now? Who owns this building?
I believe it's being run by Heritage Property Management, but I'm not exactly sure who the owner is at this time.
And we have an interview with a couple different people. One is 2 women who live in the building, and immediately followed by an interview with your wife who is at the meeting. So if we could just play that now and get an idea kind of where we stand on that.
This is Iowa City's Other News, and we're looking into a news story on the Ralston Creek Superfund site. Can you tell us what your names are, please?
I'm Amy Budke.
And I'm Margaret Slayton.
And where do you 2 live?
We live in the Illinois-Iowa Manor.
Yeah,
Same
I'm
place?
her roommate.
Okay, and where is that located?
505 East Burlington.
Right near the creek? Right near the creek?
Yeah.
It's on top of the Superfund site right now, basically.
And how long have you lived there?
Couple months. Not that long.
And did you realize it was a Superfund site when you moved in there?
No, we wouldn't have moved in if we did.
Are you thinking of moving out now?
We want to, but since the landlords had no legal responsibility to tell us about this, it's kind of hard to get out of our lease. Right now, they're just taking our money for us to live in a building that's passively toxic, so.
Have you asked the landlord to get out of the lease?
No, I'm going to write a pretty mean letter, though. We don't think they'll let us because they're not the nicest people in the world. But
Who are the landlords?
Heritage Property Management is the one that rents it out. We're not sure exactly who owns the building, but we just feel that they rent it, so they're still responsible to tell us about this. Because I think it's safe to say no one would rent from them knowing that, this was built on a toxic site. If you look on the map, like our apartment building is right on top of one of these potential coal tar tanks. So we're not happy.
And who do you think, beyond the owner, is responsible for notification about this site? There was talk today about the EPA doing it. Do you think that the feds, the state, the city should put some notification up?
Yeah, I think landlords, the EPA, everything should, anyone that feels responsible or ethically has something to do with it should be notifying, tenants that live there.
And what would you say to future tenants looking to live in Illinois-Iowa Manor?
Well, if anybody would like a sublease from us right now, we're offering it. But other than that, I fully intend in the future for us to look into the sites we're actually moving into, and not just for that apartment, but anybody moving to an apartment building. It makes sense to check up on where you're living at, so that's it.
Thank you. How did you hear about this meeting tonight?
There were signs posted up in our building.
Who posted those?
The daughter of Dan, he's the one that organized all this, found it all out, and
Thank you very much. And
Jeannie Maybanks.
you're with the Sierra Club?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. And is that the Iowa City chapter?
Yeah, it's the Iowa City area group.
Okay. And what happened here tonight? Can you explain to our viewers what's going on?
There was a meeting here, a public forum for concerned citizens in Iowa City, and the meeting was with the EPA, and the questions were directed at the EPA regarding the Iowa-Illinois Manor apartment building, and the Illinois apartment manor apartment building, and there's the EPA is designated as a Superfund site, and this has been going on for about 15 years where nothing has been done effectively to clean up the Superfund site. And there's just some concerned parents here and concerned students that live in the building as to what it means to be living on a Superfund site. And in addition to that, they be notified when they move into apartment buildings that they are going to be moving on to a Superfund site. So,
Do you think that's the crux of the issue here, notification? Do you think there's another issue perhaps is danger to people living there, immediate danger?
of course, environmental integrity is something that's important to all of us because we're all intricately tied to the environment with our health and well-being. And so the other concerned citizens of the community have a stake in the welfare of the property itself as well.
Is it the Sierra Club's position that the residents are in immediate danger by living there in the apartments?
Well, I don't think it's the Sierra Club's position as non-scientists to determine whether or not people are an imminent threat. But I think that people have a fair, I think people deserve a fair chance to know what is going on. And I think that the United States EPA owes it to the citizens of Iowa City to get to the bottom of it and make sure that there is a scientific assessment of what's going on and that the proper channels are followed to get it cleaned up if it is indeed a danger.
What responsibility do you think the city has in all this in moving things along?
Well, first of all, I think that one of the biggest concerns tonight from the largest pool of people here was just simply notification. And I think the first step the city can take as a city council is go ahead and make notification a law here in Iowa City, and we can start because the Iowa DNR said it wasn't their jurisdiction and the EPA said it wasn't their jurisdiction. I say stop passing the buck and start right there. And once we've got that, that'll increase awareness on that level alone.
So this is a real nuisance. We have a new so-called nuisance ordinance that was passed dealing with litter and other things, but perhaps you'd like to see the City Council require notification at any place designated as a Superfund site, that a sign posted, something as simple as that in the lobby of rental properties.
Well, I'd like to see it actually be a law that they have to sign a paper, not just, and in addition to it, post it. But I think that the matter of signing that piece of paper is an actual acknowledgement. I mean, students have to sign when they move in somewhere with lead paint on the walls as an acknowledgement they accept the risk. These students aren't acknowledging that they've accepted any risk by moving into the building.
Wait, who do you want to sign a paper? What would a paper say?
I think that the people that own the Iowa Illinois Manor and other sites like it across the state, across the nation, should be required to serve notification to renters moving into the property. And I think that it should also go on to incorporate land sales around the area, but I don't know.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. To where around the area?
Incorporate the land sales, land transfer sales around the area.
So anything that might, the EPA has identified a plume of where these dangerous chemicals have traveled to over the decades, and you're saying anywhere that plume is underneath, perhaps the city should require land sales have noticed that there's this plume underneath with some potential danger to buyers of that property.
Yeah, I think unless they're going to ask someone to clean it up who's causing the pollution, then yeah, they should be forced to inform people that they are indeed buying into something that is tainted.
Is the Sierra Club going to be going to the City Council to propose some of these ordinances?
I think we should.
Okay, thank you. Any final comments you'd like to make about what happened tonight?
No, I just hope we can get something done for the people.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, we're back in the studio now. That was interviews conducted October 20th at the Iowa Illinois Manor Apartment Superfund site town meeting. The meeting was a chance for residents of that apartment to ask questions of the EPA. It was moderated by Joel Bolcom, and one of the organizers, Dan Avenarius, will be on. We have him on tape in a little bit. I'm here with Nick Maybanks. Nick, what did you think of the interview? It was interesting. Those women said they would not have moved in had they known. Mm-hmm. So what can we do to avoid that? Should there be a sign posted that says, notice if you move in here, you're moving into a toxic waste site or possible?
Yeah, there's a number of things that could be done about it, and I do think it's interesting they said that they wouldn't have moved in had they known, because that really is the issue at the heart of this this controversy that we're facing right now, is notification. It's unconscionable that someone can move into an apartment building and have no idea that they're going to be living, sleeping, breathing air on top of a toxic waste site. So the fact that Amy and Margaret both said they wouldn't have moved in had they known is a call, a cry for notification. I think notification needs to be the first goal that's achieved in regards to this site. And in terms of notification, like Jeannie said, we'd like to see something in the form of a paper attached to a lease, a separate paper, advising somebody that they're going to be living on top of a site that's been designated as a Superfund site. And in addition to that, some sort of posting too. Because the Iowa Illinois Manor apartment complex is just one of many sites in the state of Iowa.
Really?
And if legislation were to happen on a state level or a federal level, then people that just go onto sites to conduct business would like to know those sort of things too.
Right. We keep saying Superfund site, and what exactly is a Superfund site? Can you explain a little bit about what Superfund is and what that means? If it's designated as a Superfund site, who designates it and why?
Sure. Over the course of the last 30 years or so, once the Environmental Protection Agency came into existence, the awareness of environmental concerns have grown more in the community. And it culminated in the early 80s when legislation was finally passed saying that enough's enough. Toxic waste sites are harming our children, they're harming us, they're polluting our groundwater, they're polluting our soil. We need to start cleaning up the messes we left behind, which ultimately go back to the topic of this show, energy companies. We need to clean up those messes. And in response to that, the federal government passed what's commonly referred to as CERCLA. And CERCLA has also been designated as Superfund because CERCLA creates a fund that cleans up these sites.
And who pays into that fund? Is it tax money?
The federal government has the money to ultimately enforce the Superfund legislation, but the federal government possesses three options when it comes to CERCLA. One is to compel the company that's deemed the responsible party to clean up the site,
Okay.
or to clean up the site themselves and then sue to collect the cost of the cleanup from the responsible party, or to engage in settlement negotiations with the responsible party, which has been the option that the federal government has pursued regarding this particular case.
Okay. Some of the other questions that I have regarding this whole thing is who would have the power to require notification? Could the city do it, as we heard on this tape? Have a city ordinance? Should it be on the state level, county level, federal level? How can we get that on the books as a piece of legislation or law?
Well, first and foremost, what also happened at the meeting is that Diane Engelman from the EPA said that the EPA has no authority to notify. So at this point in time, based on what she said, it appears as if the EPA is not going to be the one to take the initiative to notify. That leaves the state as the next option.
Okay.
The state, through the Iowa Department of Natural Resources, said at the meeting that they were deferring any action on this to the EPA because the EPA has already taken the lead on it.
So they
that
just play
leaves-
back and forth like that?
Well, the Iowa Department of Natural Resources, I don't think has even enough resources to start addressing this site and other sites like it. So the EPA, with the big federal government, they have the money, they have the resources, they're going to defer to them on it.
I see.
So that leaves us with the next governmental entity, the city. And Diana Engelman said that from the EPA said that there's no reason that the city couldn't do something along those lines. So far, the city has remained mute on this issue. And granted, it has just come to the forefront in the last couple weeks, but it's something that's gotten enough press and gotten enough attention lately that I think the city needs to at least take a position on what they're going to do, if anything, about this.
Yeah. It seems to me that's a pretty convenient way to take care of a toxic waste site. Just put a parking lot in an apartment building. Is that what's you said there's more sites throughout the state, I'm sure the country. Does that happen a lot? They just say, oh, we'll take care of it. Yeah, we'll just pave over it and no one will know.
Throughout the course of history, energy utilities have had a tradition of, once their activities are done, finding a way to remove themselves as quickly as possible from the site. If that involves keeping their company there to cover it up with the parking lot, engage in another form of energy production, whatever it may be, they do that, or like in this case, they transfer it to another private company who quickly covers it with a parking lot or what have you. In this case, apartment complex where people are living.
One other thing I heard about the apartment site is that no one has lived in it for more than 5 years, I think is the longest. It's largely student housing, right? So that would be something that someone like the EPA or Mid-American would say, well, what's the big danger? No one lives there for that long or long enough to feel the effects of these dangerous chemicals. What do you think of that? Is that an excuse? Is that a way to get out of it?
A skeptic of the EPA would say that's probably an excuse under the circumstances. That, oh, we're only dealing with people that live here in the average of 2 years, and the person that we found that has lived there the longest had been a 5-year occupancy. And based on exposure tests over the course of 2 to 5 years, we find no long-term health risks there.
Okay.
Of course, this site has only been there for 20 years, and in the past, some of the health risks don't show up until 20 years down the road, 10, 20 years down the road.
Right.
So I don't know what kind of follow-up has been done on the people that lived there during the early 80s when the site was first built, or the 90s. And I guess we'll find out, like we have in the past with similar sites, when people start getting sick, we find out, oh, maybe 2 years was exposure rate.
Yeah.
But on top of that, as well, there has been contamination found in the soil and, of course, in Ralston Creek in the area that may lead to a potential exposure to nearby residences. And you're not talking about 2 to 5 year exposures, then you're talking 20, 30 lifetime exposures.
And the creek would just take it on down to the river, and who knows where it goes then.
They found contamination related 200 to 210 feet downstream from the site.
Wow. We have another tape to roll. This is the father of one of the women who lives in the apartment complex.
Can you tell me what your name is, please?
Dan Ebenarius.
And where do you live?
I'm from Dubuque, Iowa.
And what brought you here tonight to the Iowa City Library for this meeting tonight?
The concerns over EPA's public acknowledgement of a toxic waste superfund that's located under an apartment building in Iowa City that our daughter lives in on 505 Burlington Street.
Would you like to see your daughter move out of the building?
I would have actually liked to have seen her never move in here to begin with, but unfortunately when you find out about it a week before college starts, you don't have many more options to go moving her anywhere else. And I've said it all along. What I would have liked to have seen is when the lease was signed with her, that the people who own the building or do the realty and management or leasing, I would have liked to have seen them just be upfront and honest and say, you know, this is something that we feel we have a need to tell you people, and we're being upfront about it. Obviously that didn't happen. And again, I'm not trying to slander the owners. I don't even know who they are. So I guess I'm also concerned that there are other EPA sites in the state that maybe other people are living in buildings on the same type of a situation like that. So I guess I want to make it a little wider rather than just Iowa City, because that doesn't help somebody in another part of the state that's living in the same condition. So I guess my efforts now will be to work with legislatures not only down here, but my legislatures up in the Dubuque area, to try to get them to enact legislation on a statewide basis to make it mandatory for property owners to make notifications to potential tenants. And again, I have a concern about anybody who lives in a state who may be living on a Superfund site, not just these kids in this apartment building. So
We're back now in the studio. That was Dan Ebenarius, father of one of the women who lives in the apartment built upon a toxic waste site, Superfund site. He was talking about other sites in the state of Iowa. Dan, what do you know about, or I'm sorry, Nick, what do you know about some of those other sites in Iowa?
It's actually been pretty well publicized, particularly through Tom Walsh at the Cedar Rapids Gazette, that 172 former coal gasification plant sites exist in the state of Iowa. Several of them have been cleaned up, and it has been through CERCLA, through the Superfund program, or through the state, or through private lawsuits, whatever it may be, or private party action. Yes, that many sites exist in Iowa, believe it or not.
How many have the apartment buildings on them?
That I'm not sure of.
Okay.
Yeah, that I'm not sure of. I know that a lot of the sites don't have anything on them, and a lot of the sites do have current activity on them.
There you see the map of, I believe those dots represent different former coal gas plant sites in the state of Iowa, 172 of them. We have a map here in the studio too. Iowa City, Coralville, there are some, it looks like just all over the state, kind of scattered around.
In Johnson County alone,
Johnson
they
County,
list
yeah.
4 sites. One of them, the Iowa Illinois Manor Apartments, location unknown on 2 sites, but they've narrowed it down at least to Gilbert Street and Lower Muscatine Road in Iowa City, and the Iowa River Power Company in Coralville. There's a site underneath there too.
Wow, that restaurant. This says Gilbert Street. That's as close as they could get to knowing where this place is. Lower Muscatine Road.
Yeah.
That's as close as they can get. Why the lack of documentation on this? Where's the history?
A lack of public record, I would imagine. When industrial development was taking place during the early part of the century, property was being bought out left and right, and in the course of that, a lot of documents get lost, and people don't know exactly what took place on their property. The difference between that and Iowa Illinois Manor apartment complexes, we know, so now we can do something about it.
Right. Again, I think that the most maddening thing about this is it's so close to Ralston Creek, and as you said, they found contaminants 200 feet downstream in the creek. That creek is already pretty gross from being in a city, urban pollution, and now it's leaching possibly these chemicals. They did some sampling on the site, and what did they find level-wise?
Well, they found that soil and water samples taken from the area, and they've known this for years, are heavily contaminated, was the words that were used by Diana Engelman in August of last year in an article in the Cedar Rapids Gazette, with known carcinogens.
I'm sorry, we see there's the sign next to Ralston Creek that says do not swim or go into this creek because it's, I don't know what, gross and dangerous, to paraphrase. There's the parking lot, underneath which sits some of these holding tanks.
And interestingly enough, too, one thing that has been mentioned, I don't think, is that the air inside the apartment complex itself has been sampled and has shown to contain some polynuclear aromatic compounds that are carcinogens as well. Now, not at levels that are immediately concerning, but levels that we don't know the effect of over time.
Wow. And I saw one of the health reports had various they have various sample places on this map here where they have taken ambient air sampling locations. Can they also drill in and find out here's where there's a pile of coal tar, take samples that way, or it's all underground and they can't really break up the parking lot to do that?
They can do that, and they have on occasion, and that's how they have been testing some of the soil samples from underneath the apartment complex. The way Diana Engelman described it at the meeting was that doing that is a risky process because you don't know what you're going to shake up underneath there.
Yeah.
The only way to really find out the level of contamination is to test what's in the tanks. Diana Engelman said at the meeting that there's no immediate plan to do that, because to do that you'd have to level the building. So what we're looking at in the situation overall basically is that we don't have any idea what the level of contamination is, and there's no immediate plans to find out. So that's a long-term goal. The short-term goal is, at least if you're Dan Avenarius and you have a daughter and you're moving her to college, you should know where you're putting your daughter.
Right. Notification.
Notification.
We have one more from the Diana Engelman, who you mentioned, EPA spokesperson, I believe. Is that her title? That's what I'm going to call her.
Yes.
So we just have a short clip from her. And we'll play it now.
You know, I want to address that. Unless we're finding, and one of the initial big focuses for EPA was on the air in the building, and we're just not seeing the contaminants coming into the building, and very likely it's because of how the building was built. It may also be because of how much contamination there is or isn't underneath that building. But investigating under that building would be, I guess nothing is completely impossible, but it would be extremely difficult to get meaningful information from underneath that building.
The next time you'll be hearing something from us, and we'll put something out in writing about this, is when we know further and in some detail about this removal work that's going to be taking place, that we anticipate taking place in late December, early January. Sometime prior to that, there will be something sent out in writing that describes what's going to be done, where it's going to be done, and what the schedule is for that happening.
Okay, we're back in the studio. My guest, Nick Maybanks, from the Sierra Club, who was at that meeting you saw October 20th on the Superfund site here in Iowa City. We also have Holly, if you'd scoot your chair over here a little bit. Holly Berkowitz, who is one of the members of the Iowa City News Collective. And Holly, I know you've done some water quality testing and sampling of things. What can you tell us about concerns with this site?
Well, a couple of things. The most important thing, I think, is to prevent this kind of contamination from happening in the first place. And that reaches up to the public policy level and to the private industry level, where our leaders need to be have more vision for the future, because once this happens, it's very, very almost impossible to correct it.
What?
And
I was just saying to Nick, why can't they correct it? They've cleaned up other sites. What is wrong with leveling the building, cleaning it up, and start from scratch, start over? They don't have the legal power to do that, or?
Well, it's probably initially say the age-old battle between private parties and the government. There's no way that the Heritage Property Management, if they are the owners of the building, is going to just say, okay, tear down the building. So, and then the enormous cost involved too, as well, and nobody being willing to take on that cost for the time being.
Right.
It can be done, it can be cleaned up, but in order to get that done, it takes a huge amount of cutting of the red tape and bureaucracies to do it.
Yeah.
I would say that it has to do also with our economic system, and that our current cash system measures only the short-term private cash flow of private persons. And it rarely looks beyond 5 years at the most in consequences, and it doesn't count the potentials for causing public costs in the next generation. Mm-hmm. And it omits that from our economic system. And what our public budgets need to do instead is to calculate these costs, actualize them through time, in public health costs, in cancer, potential cancers, potential asthma, potential neurological impacts, and the costs of those, the dependents who are going to be taking care of these people. And our economic system does not do that at this point.
You were telling me last week that the way you sample can affect the readings that you get. So you've done water quality, and you said if you sample in the middle of the lake
during the night, when the water is very quiet, you can get good sampling results.
Good meaning no pollutants or fewer pollutants.
That's right. But if you sample during a turbulent time when it's windy or when there's a flood, or during the time when the pollutants are being dumped into the waterway, yes, you're going to get higher readings. So I believe that if you want to fool the system so that you don't have to clean it up, you can actually sample so that you don't have to clean it up.
So to me, that's amazing that a scientific sample could be somehow politicized.
That's
to
right.
Say,
that's right.
well, maybe it's not so bad. Let's sample it to make it not look so bad.
That's right.
I saw some of the readings they took, and they were different by a magnitude of.
Also, the composites are going. You can mix composites with you can mix the higher samples with the higher amounts with the samples of the lower amounts to lower your levels, as you can do in a composite.
Last week I saw an article that said the Superfund fund, if that's what I can call it, is dwindling because it hasn't been re-upped kind of by legislation. Can you talk about that, Nick?
It's been happening for years, actually. When the Superfund was first created, it had plenty of money, and it used a lot of that money, and they were getting a lot of good things done. But over the course of time, when other priorities began to take place in the budget, and the times demanded that the federal government spend money on different things, and the governmental makeup switched, a particular party took control of Congress in around 1995 or so, no money went into Superfund, and now we see it down to levels that you can't even clean up one site, nonetheless all the sites that need cleaning. Wow. And there's no immediate plans or demand of our current representatives, the current party in control, to say, let's get some money back in this and let's get this program going again.
Scary. I'm trying to see our schedule here and make sure I'm on track for the next thing. Can we roll that tape, or should we talk some more in here? Roll the tape. We have another tape now. Is from a few weeks ago. A woman came to town, and she is used to live in Utah, downwind of some of the nuclear testing. So today we're talking about energy aftermath. This ties in because atomic energy, we're still feeling the effects of some of the testing in the 1950s and early 60s. So this was a talk she gave at the library. It was a couple weeks ago. This was taped by Greg Thompson. Let's play that tape.
Hi. I come to you from southern Utah, one of the most beautiful places on earth that I consider one of the most beautiful places. Although I'm pretty impressed with your little community, what I've seen of it so far. It is very beautiful here. I grew up believing I had a charmed existence. I grew up in a small little farm south of Cedar City, Utah, where we raised our own gardens. We swam in the ponds for entertainment. We rode horses. We grew our own food and we drank our own cow's milk and grew our own cattle. That charmed existence was cut short for a lot of people, and a lot of us kept on believing that life was great. When life is good, it's hard to believe that awful things can happen, but they do. And sometimes the people living downwind from the test site found out shortly after they began testing in 1951. The United States government chose Shoshone land in the Nevada test site to test all their nuclear weapons at that time, even though they'd been told prior that it was unsafe to do so. They considered the downwind Mormon community population a low-use segment of the population. And we fell right into place. We were perfect guinea pigs.
And AEC has figures, but it keeps them out of sight.
My youngest daughter, Bethany, was diagnosed with a deadly form of cancer, neuroblastoma. We watched this wonderfully lovely, inquisitive child fight many struggles to live. She went through 2 years of chemotherapy, a 9-hour surgery, and 7 weeks of radiation treatments. She was off treatment and making medical history, and her hair had grown back, and she was going back to school, and things were great. My sister was diagnosed with melanoma.
With his teeth, dear, scarlet billows start to spread. Strontium 90 shows no color, but it leaves you just as dead.
My sister had been in the hospital when we left, and would stop by to see her, and she said, "I'm fine, just go, I'll be fine, find out what's wrong with Bethany." I came home and crawled into bed, and I got a call from the hospital about 2 o'clock in the morning that my sister was in a coma. I got to the hospital, and my sister was on a respirator and in a coma. Oh. My sister had 6 small children, aged 9 months to 13. She had fought so hard to stay alive for those children and was in such denial that she wasn't going to live that it was never a question. I crawled on the bed with her and told her when it was Bethany's time she needed to come and get her because I wasn't going to let her go by herself. So my sister died that morning, and they let us stay home long enough for the funeral and everything, and then we went back to Salt Lake and started Bethany's treatments. Bethany died 1 month later. I'm always not going to cry. I wanted to die. It would have been so much easier to just die at that point. And I had these 2 other little children at home that needed us so badly. And I was so devastated. And my husband was so devastated that I look back on it now, and I don't know how we survived it. My 2 other children were neglected because my husband was off one direction morning and I was the other, and they were at home functioning. trying to protect us as they could.
Blue dear, it's not like the little might. If the baby is deformed, dear, you just blame the other side.
Here I was with these people that I had learned and been taught my whole life to fear, that were loving their babies the same way I loved my children, and their hopes and dreams for their children were the same as ours. And I let somebody teach me to fear them. I also had the chance to go to Japan. And I don't know if I wasn't listening or if our education was so limited or so scrutinized that we did not learn the horrors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. We were told that that's what would happen to us if the Russians had dropped a bomb on us, but never the horror of what we had done to these people. When I actually saw that and met with the Hibakusha, I was so appalled to think that we could possibly ever think to do that. The whole United States, I mean, we're all downwinders. You can't sit in some little spot and say, well, I'm glad I wasn't there, because everybody in the United States got some from the Nevada test site. And that was when they were monitoring their above ground tests. They did over 900 underground that they vented, and depending on the wind pattern, the cluster clouds, and the rain, it went everywhere. And that's kind of a dirty little secret they didn't want anybody to know about.
Trace, dear, no one knows who gets the knife. You can always say that background radiation took the life.
When we were talking about, well, we'd spent the whole meeting talking about not enough money for funding for the Atomic Veterans or the Veterans Administration, or a lot of social issues that people were asking about. Kept saying there's not enough money, there's not enough money. And I was the last question. I said, I've got a great solution for you to find all the money you need. And he said, oh, what is that? And I said, quit producing weapons of mass destruction. And he got really angry with me and went on to tell me how important this war was and how they precisely pinpointed where they wanted to bomb, and that we could have never been so successful at this. I told him I felt like it was a terrorist attack on our part.
Gets the knife. You can always say that background radiation took the life in your milk on Monday morning.
Okay, we're back in the studio. Iowa City Other News. Today is November 1st, 2003. And in the studio with me, Nick Maybanks of the Sierra Club, Holly Berkowitz, who is a member of the Iowa City Other News Collective. That was a lecture presentation by a woman who lived downwind of some of the nuclear testing. You saw the map. It looks like we all live to some degree downwind of some of the testing. I want to hear from both of you, but Nick, what do you think of that?
It's a tragic story, and nuclear energy itself has proven to be somewhat of a tragic story. When it was first implemented in our country, Dwight Eisenhower said that it would be too cheap to meter and would be safe. It's proven it hasn't been safe, and it's not even cheap either. It's time to take a serious look at nuclear energy and why we continue to use it. The Senate had a chance to address the issue last year with the Yucca Mountain legislation. They decided that instead of finding a way to stop creating nuclear waste, we're just going to find a place to store it so we can continue to do it. It's that lack of foresight that has let nuclear energy continue to contaminate our air. This story is tragic because all these people were doing was breathing air.
Right, right.
And they end up sick.
Happening to live in a place that was dangerous, like earlier we were talking about this Iowa, Illinois manor apartment, which
Absolutely.
hopefully we won't see effects as we've seen with downwind. Holly, what do you think? Can you comment about that?
I'm concerned now that the underground testing is being done secretly, and some of the indicators of that are earthquakes and possibly public health consequences. And we need to look at that and tackle the creative accounting that goes on to say that it's too expensive to prevent, but we can funnel all our civilian dollars into the military funds that cause this, with the assumption that nobody's going to get hurt. I think that's fairly illogical. And my second point is that we need to prevent the assumption that building on the sites of the toxic waste sites and landfills are safe. Some people are pushing scientific illiteracy to the point into public policy where it doesn't belong. We need scientific literacy. We need to count the subclinical causes, the causes of subclinical diseases and mystery illnesses that our political system doesn't want to count because we're not counting it in cash. But we need to count more than cash, and we need to value the invaluable. And I did a study of the water indicator creatures in Ralston Creek in 1996 and found that there's a wide range of diversity of all kinds of creatures, of all kinds of diverse forms and sizes at the top in Hickory Hill Park. But I found practically nothing except a few leeches down by the sewer treatment plant. And this site explains the devastation of that creek.
So we've seen a private company leaving their toxic waste. We've seen the U.S. government who doesn't seem to care about the after effects. Right now we're going to go to another guest in this studio, Al Kittrell, and he is going to talk a little bit about Alliant Energy in our ongoing regular segment here at Iowa City Other News called Where's the Outrage? Let's go to him, Al.
Thank you. When I agreed to do this show about 10 days ago, I was mad. I'd gotten a little offer from Alliant Energy to pay more than I usually do for my natural gas. At that time, I thought, maybe if I can air this public grievance, because it's not just myself, I think this is in the public interest, maybe I'll have an impact. And after the last 10 days, now I'm outraged. I've had an opportunity to talk in a limited sense to some representatives from Alliant, to our state senator, Joe Balcom, who was helpful, and an attorney from the Iowa Utilities Board, and a staff member, unnamed. In a nutshell, it's this. You as a customer, if you have a track record of living in a location and they have some data on you, my specific case was I can pay $86.43 for my gas. They tell me about my normal gas bill would be $61.47. So I can voluntarily pay 40% more over the next year. And I don't know how much gas I get. They won't tell me that. They'll tell me that there's a limit, and if I exceed it, I can be removed from the program with really no recourse other than to pay all the associated fees that are involved. I listed 10 questions for Alliant, only one of which they really gave me any hard data on. One is that they had about 3,800 customers last year in a tri-state area who tried this program, were reportedly happy, whatever that means, and 1,036 of them either canceled themselves or were canceled. My assumption is that this limit of gas use comes into play when it starts to erode profits, then you're out of the program, and I am outraged. Some of the things that I discovered, essentially to do this, they had to file with the IUB why it's okay to not follow the gas regulation rules, essentially be deregularized, if that's a word, on the sale of natural gas. They filed TF03358. I've got a one page of that. I don't know if you can get in close on this or not. There's one page, and I'll go slowly to the next page. Now, it admittedly, this looks like gobbledygook. Turns out they sent me this information in a PDF format, which I couldn't easily translate. But then I would have to translate it into lawyerese, and then I would further have to translate it into regulese, which even by one spokesperson from Alliant, they have difficulty understanding the regulator talk. I don't know what this is. This is their reason for not following the rules. The IUB apparently has the right to waive the provisions of the rules, and have done so in this case, with the idea that this is supposed to help customers, supposed to protect, what did they say? Protect customers from extremely high gas prices. And my question would be, if you're paying 40% more, how you're being protected from paying higher prices. I think by definition, simple math, you're already paying higher prices. This is hyped with a big advertisement campaign. Gee, it's going to be cold. We are almost certain that you're going to be paying higher gas prices, or we are, and we'll pass that along to you. You may or may not benefit from this program, but trust is take us up on this. The matter of trust comes in again. I asked the IUB, well, how do we have any assurances that this is going to be okay? Well, let's see. If you feel like you've been robbed over the course of the next year, having taken them up on this offer, what will they do for you? Let's see. A year from now, they will look at all the statistics and they will verify for you that you have been robbed by Alliant Energy. You know, deregulation, what's a little deregulation? Deregulation cannot benefit consumers in a monopoly sales situation. I tell you, there are so many questions that are unanswered here that I think this does need a little bit, needs to be looked into further. If I, as a citizen, can't simply ask the questions and get answers either from the energy company and really not good answers from the IUB, they said they had my same concerns, but they apparently were able to overlook those concerns and approve gas deregulation, if only on a limited basis. And that's my point for today. I hope that I get some response. As a matter of fact, am I going to subscribe to this? Sure, I'm going to subscribe to this. I'd like to pay more. And by the way, if there's anybody out there that has some excess Enron stock, I'd be interested in buying right now because I hear the prices, the share prices are really low right now. Thanks.
That was Al Kittrell of talking about Alliant Energy's new payment plan. And my name's Adam Burke. This has been Iowa City Other News. I'm going to wrap up here by talking about a couple of announcements. One is the 10,000 Hours Show is having a volunteer fair on November 5th from 11:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. in the second floor ballroom of the IMU. The 10,000 Hours Show, if you haven't heard, is a chance to volunteer 10 hours of your time for a good cause and then go to a concert. They have not named the musician performer who's going to be on the concert, but this is a way that you can't buy your way into this show. You have to volunteer 10 hours of your time. So I think it's a very interesting idea, and more information can be found at www.10,000hours, that's 10 TENTHOSAND hours.org, and they have a website there, or volunteering at 10,000hours.org. And again, the volunteer fair is Wednesday, November 5th, 11:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. We've been talking about the Superfund site at the Iowa-Illinois Manor Apartments in Iowa City on Burlington and Van Buren. And there you see contact information for Iowa City Other News if you want to comment on this show. One way to get involved and maybe take action on something related to the Superfund site in Iowa City is to apply for the Planning and Zoning Commission, where there is a opening. The current chairperson, Ann, I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this right, Bajurg. That's not an easy name there. She is resigning her position. They're taking applications no later than Wednesday, December 10th, and they're going to appoint someone to be a new commissioner on December 16th. That's the Planning and Zoning Commission in Iowa City. So possibly you could suggest a notification law like we talked about earlier in the city that would notify people who live above toxic waste sites, in this town at least. My guests today have been Nick Maybanks and Holly Berkowitz. Any wrap-up final comments? I think we have a few minutes. Maybe.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
2 words, renewable energy.
Renewable energy.
And an explanation after that. It all boils down to, this is a show about energy, the pollution that energy creates. One way to avoid that in the future is to start investing in technology where we don't have to look at these issues 20 years from now. And in Iowa, we have a chance and opportunity that a lot of the country doesn't have, because we have the biofuels, we have the wind, we have all those options at our fingertips to start nurturing renewable energy into the future.
Great idea. Holly?
I have 3 words. Count more than cash. And here's some more. Prevention pays, and crisis mismanagement costs too much.
Okay. We're going to roll credits, and we can continue to discuss things. And thanks for watching Iowa City Other News. This show will replay on Wednesday night at 10 p.m.
I'd like
Prevention
to,
pays.
yes,
Yeah.
Prevention pays dividends. And I'd like to comment on Al's comments that I think we really need to look at the public health costs of deregulation and dig in, find out if Enron did have something to do with the blackouts in California, and the ties between the oil companies and the political process in this country, and the motives of the Bush administration to cover up the health consequences of their actions.
Okay, good. Thanks for watching Iowa City Other News. Again, this show will replay Wednesday and next Saturday, if you caught us in the middle, Wednesday night at 10 p.m., next Saturday at 11 a.m. Thanks for watching. Oh, and I forgot to give our endorsements. Shoot. Oh, well.
It's on.
And I didn't have nearly enough time to get some real fun.
Oh, they are? Oh, don't forget to vote Tuesday, November 4th. And you just heard me babbling there. We're endorsing 3 candidates for Iowa City Council. Brandon Ross in the at-large seat. If you could bullet vote for him. Regina Bailey, and the other one is Karen Pease. So there you see it, our Iowa City Other News endorsements, Regina, Brandon, and Karen Pease. Don't forget to vote Tuesday, November 4th. Thanks.